On this week's 51%, comedian Samantha Bee talks perimenopause, sex education in the U.S., and the other inspirations behind her latest tour.
There's a catharsis that can happen if you just say the weirdest thing, if you just say the craziest things out loud. People just want to feel heard. They want to feel seen. They want to feel heard, and so do I.
We also speak with comedian Erin Harkes about her new special and album, Uncle Ernie, and get a look into her writing process. I'm Jessie King. It's all up next on 51%.
I was standing around like one of those girls I had seen in a movie. The whole world was a movie back then. I had my sunglasses on, I wanted to be seen without seeing shy Lolita. I wasn't really in it, I didn't really get it.
You're listening to 51%, a WAMC production dedicated to women's issues and experiences. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jessie King. We've highlighted some heavier topics in recent weeks, from youth mental health and homelessness to infant mortality and estate planning. I think we've earned a lighter episode, so today we're bringing you a pair of interviews with comedians you may be familiar with. First up, Samantha Bee has received global recognition from the success of her weekly late-night comedy series, Frontal with Samantha Bee, which was nominated for 70 awards and ran for 7 seasons on TBS. When it ended last year, Frontal was the longest-running satirical late-night show hosted by a woman. Bee has been nominated for 18 Emmy Awards for the program, winning for both writing and executive producing. Before that, in 2003, Bee joined Comedy Central's The Daily Show, where she served as the longest-running Daily Show correspondent before leaving in 2015. And recently, she's been doing stand-up. Bee recently caught up with WAMC's Sarah LeDuc on the tail end of her fall tour, titled Your Favorite Woman, The Joy of Sex Education. The pair caught up on Bee's inspiration behind the tour, her view on sex education, and how it feels getting back to work after this year's writers and actors strikes in Hollywood. Just a note, at the time of their conversation, the Writers Guild of America strike had just ended, but the SAG-AFTRA strike, which ended last month, was still going strong. But here's Samantha Bee with WAMC's Sarah LeDuc.
Were you first in your life a feminist or a funny woman? Which one came first?
Oh, you know what? I can actually answer that. I believe that I was a feminist first. And the evidence that I have for that is that I once won a hat in a kid's letter writing competition, I guess, or
sure.
I wrote a letter to the editor, which I've been trying so hard to track down. But I won a letter to the editor when I was around 8 years old because I was so mad that in commercials for board games, the boys were always victorious. And I deeply didn't think it was fair because I win every board game I play, or I did at the time anyway. And I didn't feel like it was an accurate representation of how good my gameplay was. And they sent me a winter hat, and it was very ugly, and I never wore it, but I considered it
a prize.
Proof. Yes, a prize, a treasure.
Do you recall what publication you wrote to?
I do. It was because I'm from Toronto originally. It was the Toronto Sun. They had a Sunday section just for kids that was like all the comics. And there was a section in the Sunday Sun called My Beef. And I sure had a beef. And I made it known. And they took me seriously, and I appreciated it.
Do you think that's a core event in your life that sort of set you on a path toward all of the services you provide and laughs you provide to us now?
I don't think so, but it definitely is fun to be able to look back and think, oh, my goodness. These feelings about injustice are kind of innate. Wow. Like I was very young to have those thoughts, and I'm proud of that. But you know, I was raised by my grandmother and my single mother, and so I was raised a certain way. I was raised to believe a few things, that's for sure.
The name of your show is Your Favorite Woman, The Joy of Sex Education. Why this show? Why now?
When I was doing Full Frontal, because I did Full Frontal for about 7 years, 7 seasons, which was great. And during that time, I entered perimenopause. And let me tell you something. If you ever thought you knew anything about your body or your mind, once you enter perimenopause, for I think the vast majority of women, all bets are off. Like, I just couldn't understand what was happening. I felt like I didn't know myself. And I think that I consider myself to be quite an informed person. And I really hit a wall. I really did. I was upset all the time. I felt alone. I felt like it was only happening to me. I thought that what was kind of happening in my body was a result of just the stress of doing the show. And I was really gripped by it. So it became just something that I thought back to frequently. You know, I resolved some issues for myself for sure, but it has taken years to kind of figure myself out and know anything about perimenopause at all. And then once the show ended, I had to think, what are the things that I want to carry through? What are the stories that I would be telling? What are the things I would want to say, you know, as a next phase of life? Like, what is the next phase of life? What are the things that I'm compelled to say? Because I've said a lot. So what are the stories that I have to say before my career comes to a conclusion? The stories about our bodies and how much we don't know about them and how we just haven't been treated honorably. They have never tested medications on women's bodies. Everything we're asked to know nothing, dwell in shame, keep our pain secret, not ask questions. We're just raised to not talk about these things, or think about these things, and all of that is changing, and I want to be a part of that change. I enjoy speaking honestly about my body. I think that we have not been taught about ourselves. I think the medical community hasn't taken us seriously, and the result of that is confusion, isolation across most women that I know.
Yeah.
It's not unique. It's not unique. And so I talk about it in a comedic way because like a lot of crazy stuff happened to me, and I think it's really funny and dumb. I also just think it's really funny and ridiculous, and I like to say it out loud because I feel like there's a catharsis that can happen if you just say the weirdest thing, if you just say the craziest things out loud.
Yeah.
People just want to feel heard. They want to feel seen. They want to feel heard, and so do I.
I don't mind telling you in the least that I turned 40 this calendar year, and I am child-free by choice, and really did in my late 30s and now at 40 felt like I was suddenly kind of comfortable getting a handle on being who I was in my own skin. And then it did occur to me as a forward-looking person that apparently that is going to turn on its head when the end of my fertile viability comes, and I'm going to be, just all tossed around by hormones and what have you.
Maybe it won't happen for you. Maybe you'll just like land that jumbo jet with the greatest ease. You'll just light on the ground, and it'll be just like a feather. And I hope, I hope that is the case for you.
Well,
you know,
thank you.
Just everybody has. I do say in the show, everybody has. We're all just kind of precious snowflakes. Each person has their own varied experience of it. But we're also not taught about childbirth and the things that can go wrong with us. Medicines were not, the FDA never did tests on female bodies until, the 1990s.
Yeah.
So a lot of our medications
Well, they were brand
calibrated.
new then, right? The female body just was invented in the 90s.
That's correct. Yeah, it just came into fruition in the 1990s. So that, it's very understandable.
The title of the show, as I mentioned, is Your Favorite Woman, The Joy of Sex Education, or The Joy of Sex Education. And I wanted to ask you about the first part, Your Favorite Woman. Why did you choose that for the title?
I think it's just a little cheeky. I don't know if well, hopefully, I aim to be everybody's favorite woman by the end of the show. Maybe that's possible.
Sure. I did wonder if it didn't necessarily apply to you, but that the things you'll be talking about would apply to everyone's favorite woman, whoever that may be.
Everyone's favorite. Well, hopefully that is the case. And working my way through the show, definitely see, people nudging, like elbowing their significant other in their seats. Like there's a lot of like, see, I told you.
How have you developed the show? Who have you worked with, and what ideas did you want to make sure you included as you built up the show that you're taking all over North America?
I guess I just wanted to keep some of Full Frontal with me. I love storytelling and I like the visuals, and I don't do stand-up, so it's a more multimedia experience. So I worked with a few people who I've worked with on Full Frontal, just a few, doing some graphic work and editing and pulling some of the elements together and helping with the writing. And so, yeah, so it's just a tiny, tiny team moving forward. As I began to tour, I really began to see that these are universal issues that come up. We do not teach sex education in this country. Like, our track record is terrible and actually declining. It's actually getting so much worse out there. Like, the sex education that we supply in this country is barely existent in most places and being threatened everywhere. So I feel like the stuff that I'm talking about in the show is very much applicable to everywhere. And I really do feel that in the audiences. Like, there are places where I've been where I thought, are people going to come out for this? I don't know if there are old Full Frontal fans in this neck of the woods. Like, are there people in Iowa who want to see this type of material? And I have to say that, yes, the answer is yes. The answer is yes, actually.
Is the education system as different in Canada as the healthcare system is in Canada when compared to the United States? Is it different there?
It is different, but it is following a similar trajectory, actually. There's a lot more talk of book bans and keeping education out of schools, and there is a tremendous debate about sex education in Canada now that tracks kind of that leaning towards that kind of right-wing populism is so evident in the United States. That's happening in Canada too. So I think that the whole world, I think, kind of globally, we're on that path. So it's not unique to the United States, although it has been perfected here.
Could you speak as to why you think society is terrified to talk about women's health issues, and what happens inside of and eventually outside of women's bodies?
Well, I do think that when people know about themselves and they have knowledge of themselves, I guess when you can't keep people quiet and when you can't keep them, in a state of shame or feeling less than or feeling quiet, it threatens the power structure. We know what the power structure looks like, and they really intend to keep it that way. It's all about who controls what. It's really all about power. And if you can disempower people in any possible way, even if you don't know that that's the goal, even if you don't know that that's what you're doing, it's really about disempowering people. When you keep people away from information that they need about starting with themselves, people are not on solid footing. And that, honestly, is very great for the patriarchy. I wasn't going to say the word patriarchy in this interview, but then it just popped out.
Well,
I had to.
Of course. Knowing all of that, facing all of that, how do you, Sam Bee, make it funny? Mm-hmm. How do you make it comedy?
I know. Because it's so ridiculous. Because it just is. It's just funny to me that when you go and give birth in a hospital in this country, you are asked to fashion your own diapers out of literally puppy pads. If you're not laughing, you're going to be crying. So you might as well laugh about it.
You have 3 children. Am I correct on this?
I do, yeah. And
did you have anything good about the experience of giving birth in the health system, other than, of course, receiving your beautiful children? Is there anything good, anything hopeful about the process that you can share?
I don't think so. I don't think it was. Well, I love my doctor. I love her. Some of the nurses were great, but I think the system itself is designed terribly. And of course, we're one of the only countries in the world that doesn't have any type of, federally protected parental leave. I mean, it's bananas what we are. Like, I actually, having done this show in Canada, I realized there are whole swaths of the show that Canadians really just can't relate to, because they're like, what do you mean you don't have maternity leave? That's a human, they're like, that's a human right. My maternity leave was over after 8 weeks. you're still turned inside out.
Yeah.
Still turned inside out, and you're thinking about having to put casseroles up in your freezer so you can go back to work full time. It's really not pretty inhumane.
I read in your Substack, you wrote this, and I'll ask you to expand on it. I continue to believe, I, Sam B, not me, Sarah, but I do agree, and in fact say out loud in my live show that we should give women all the power and control in the world for 5 years. And then if things don't get better within that 5-year time frame, the men can have it all back. It makes sense to me.
Not a nice idea. It makes so much sense. Just let us try it. Just let us try it. I promise things will be better. And then if they're not, it's just temporary. You guys can have it all back.
Regarding the writers' strike, are you pleased that it happened the way it did, and are you personally satisfied with the deal that the WGA acquired?
Yeah, they did a great job. They really did a great job, and it was a very painful process for a lot of people. So that is undeniable. I'm very glad that writers are back to work now, but it was definitely, they ground it out. That was a tough one.
From, watching from the outside, from Radio Land over here, it's hard to imagine everybody being able to work with all of the producers and people who essentially denied their humanity for so long. How do you or how do your fellow writers, help to mend those bridges or continue to work with people who were, treated you so badly?
I do think that there's an understanding that business is business and the personal is personal.
Okay.
Sometimes those things collide with each other for sure. And we're all so privileged. We're all so lucky to be able to work in this industry, and that is a part of it. I think all of us at every level of the industry that's working, I think there is an element where we're all like, right, we're really lucky to be doing this. So should we just yell on? Okay, great.
Samantha Bee, I'm an enormous fan. I'm so glad you exist, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. I don't know what is happening to my phone, but thank you.
That was comedian, writer, and TV host Samantha Bee speaking with WAMC's Sarah LeDuc about the end of her fall tour, Your Favorite Woman, The Joy of Sex Education.
Ladies and gentlemen, Erin Harkes.
Our next guest is fresh off the premiere of her second comedy special and record, titled Uncle Ernie. Erin Harkes is a frequent winner of Best Local Comedian in New York's Capital Region. When she's not performing her music, Harkes is a longtime singer-songwriter who has released 2 albums under the moniker Erin Harkes and The Rebound. She is playing clubs across upstate New York and lately hosting a monthly series called Women Aren't Funny with other female comedians at Universal Preservation Hall in Schenectady. Since switching from music, she's performed in just about every major club in New York City, Toronto, and Montreal. I recently got the chance to sit down with Harkes to learn more about her new special and how she's built her career.
I usually keep it very personal. I avoid anything that's like too topical or too political. I try to keep it light, although it can get a little dark sometimes. I try not to. I feel like if you write something, it's okay to be, topical and be current, but then your material has a shelf life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, as opposed to if I write about an experience in my life, I can tell that story or that joke for as long as I want to. But also, if you keep it personal, you have less of a chance of inadvertently copying somebody else's material, which is a big, we're always concerned about putting out stuff that other people have done. And of course, there's parallel thinking. So it's not necessarily that somebody's stealing material, but you never want to be blamed for that. You never want to be accused of that. And so I find the easiest way to make sure that I'm not taking anybody else's jokes, even inadvertently, is by just writing about my own experiences.
I think that's smart. And, I remember talking about the same kind of thing, that parallel thinking in my music classes in college, too. Like part of the reason popular music might take on a lot of the same sounds is that everyone's listening and drawing inspiration from each other. And that can help create genres in some ways, but it can also lead to people coming up with the same idea at the same time.
Yeah, and it is interesting. And like I said, it does happen. I mean, there are some people that flat out will just rip off another artist. And then there's some people that genuinely don't. Like I wrote, and honestly, I took it I was flattered by it. A few years ago, I wrote a joke that I thought was incredible. And I was at the gym and Comedy Central was on, and it was Hannibal Buress, who was one of my favorite comedians. And he had a new special, and he had a joke that was so close to mine that I was like, well, I know obviously that I didn't take his joke because the special came out after I wrote mine, but I had to get rid of the joke because I don't want anybody to think that I would take from him. When all was said and done, I was like, your writing must not be too terrible if that's who you're having parallel thoughts with. So
That's very true. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about your new special. Who is Uncle Ernie? Where did you get that title?
Well, I have a beautiful niece who is now 2.5. And when I first started to go out to visit, when she first started to talk, she couldn't say Erin. And so she would call me Ern. And there's a joke on the album where I'm talking about being there, and my sister, she was wanting me to do more things with her than my sister. And I was like, which is the whole goal, is to get her to like me more than she likes my sister anyway. But then when it came time to change her diaper, my sister was like, oh, you want Uncle Ernie to do it? And that just kind of like stuck. So.
Well, how has the response been to it so far? Because I know you just released it on December 6th, right?
Yes, the response has been incredible. I don't have any of the numbers for how the album is doing just yet, but the YouTube special has gotten close to 20,000 views in less than a week. Pretty impressive for a grassroots project. I haven't run any advertising for it other than, getting interviewed and stuff, but it's just like, it's funny because the album itself and all the other things that I put money into making sure it was promoted, and I waited for the special to come out on YouTube before I assessed what I was going to put into it. And I haven't put a dime into it. And I mean, I guess it's just easy to click and watch something. Like it's harder for me to get people to subscribe to the channel, which is something that I kind of need. And it's harder for people to like download albums and stuff. But YouTube, I think it's just easy. People just click and watch and they leave it on in the background. But for whatever reason, it's been clicked on nearly 20,000 times in less than a week. And I couldn't be more flattered by that. I'm really overwhelmed by the response.
I'm curious, what has it been like building your career and making that transition from music? What has that work been like?
I've definitely been trying to branch out. The trouble has been for me is that music has been my full-time job for so long that it directly conflicts with the comedy schedule. Like if somebody had, a day job, they could pursue comedy at night on the weekends nonstop, but that's when my day job is. And so I haven't been able to pursue it in the way I would have wanted to until recently. I'm making more of a shift, which is an investment. It's terrifying. I've taken less musical gigs. I got passed by a major club down in New York City, and passed in comedy is a good thing. It's so funny every time I say it because it sounds negative, like they passed me. I got into New York Comedy Club, and now I'm going to be hosting there regularly. And I'm hoping that if the album continues to do well and the special does well, that I can look into starting to tour a little bit as a comedian without, completely starting over, which I started doing music full time a little over 10 years ago, quitting my day job and going at it full time. And that was terrifying. And I kind of feel like I'm doing that all over again with comedy, but it's exciting.
With all the experience that you have on stage, do you still get nervous? Because I do this show every week, but you put me in front of an audience and there's probably still going to be a part of me that wants to die a little bit.
I definitely do still get nervous with comedy, not so much with music, but with comedy I do, but I like it. It's a rush. It's nerves. I feel like it means that I'm doing something right. And people always go like, don't be nervous. And I'm like, well, first of all, why didn't I think of that? But secondly, if I'm not nervous, I'm not paying attention. So I need to be nervous to an extent, because I've had shows before where I'm not nervous at all, and they don't go great because I'm just kind of like, I get a little cocky, and I get up there and I just start talking, and I'm like, you're not prepared. You thought that you could just waltz in and do this. And so the nerves are good. The nerves keep you focused and keep you present.
Have you ever been heckled by anybody? How do you deal with that?
Oh boy. Probably nothing I could share on the radio. No, I'm just kidding. It depends on the situation. I mean, a lot of times I think that some people, I shouldn't jinx myself like this. I think sometimes people are too afraid to heckle me because I kind of have a reputation for being a little on the tough side. So I haven't had to deal with it too often. Sometimes it's just a matter of somebody talking back because they think that that's part of the show. But like, if you catch me in a bad moment or you like have derailed like my rhythm from the night, I definitely have snapped some pretty quick things out that are not very nice. It's hard to explain the type of response. It's like your subconscious, it's almost like blinking or breathing. It's involuntary. And then, you wait and see what happens. And then you just try and get the show back. And the crowd can completely make or break the comedy. Like I've had nights with some of the best comedians I know, and I'll get done and I'll be like, oh, they're a little tight tonight. They're a little tough tonight. And then you hear their interpretation, like people that I've just seen kill it nonstop. And some nights you have a crowd that is like so great that it doesn't even feel like work. And then you have other nights where like you're out there, like you feel like you're doing manual labor. But for example, though, I was opening for Mark Normand a couple of months ago, and I wasn't as familiar with his fan base as I should have been, because I had some jokes that were a little more relative to women of my age, I guess, because I was trying to do new material that night as I had hosted multiple shows there. That's what I do when I have a repeat show. I try to change up my material each time so that the people that come every time are not sitting through the same set. But so I had new material, and some of it was like about like a neck cream, like I had a joke about that. And I had a joke about, hormonal acne. And then I'm watching the audience get there and I'm noticing that it's all like younger men. And I'm like, I can't do any of this material now. Like I have to change it up. And luckily I had some things, in my pocket that I could build on that could be a little bit more relatable to that audience. But that is probably the best example of when I've had to completely shift and pivot at the last second.
Well, given a situation where you don't have to pivot, is there anything you'd really like to explore, or I guess that you'd like to see talked about more in comedy?
Not necessarily. I think that I touch upon a lot of different things. I always like when I bring something up because everybody feels like their experiences are so personal. And, sure, they're like relatable, but you don't realize how relatable they are until you get up and you say something. Like I was talking about a fight that I had with my husband and how it seemed to be over quickly, but how I was driving to the show and I was like, here's what I should have said. And I did this like rapid fire, like you could like that. And people were laughing so hard. And I was like, wow, I'm not the only crazy woman in the audience, like I'm not the only crazy woman in the room, because I had that experience. And the whole joke wrapped up with how as soon as I got to where I was going, there was a text from him asking me if he could eat the leftover steak in the fridge. So it was like, he wasn't even thinking about this fight, it was like all me.
Well, Erin, thanks so much for taking the time. Lastly, do you have any advice for those who might just be getting started?
The most common advice that comedians give to other comedians is just get as much stage time as possible. But I would make it like an amendment to that, because when I first started out, there were a lot more open mics than there are now. And some of them, honestly, I don't think they were making me a better comedian. I think that it's not always the most supportive audience. I think that you should definitely start out doing as many open mics as you can. But eventually try to get on shows and don't be afraid to try new material at those shows. Like you always have to be willing to try new material. You have to be willing to fail and just like eat it on stage. It's a hard lesson to learn, but it's the most important one. And also like leave your ego at the door, because I know a lot of people that are like, I know that this joke is funny and I'm going to tell it no matter what. And I'm like, but your only job is to make the audience laugh. So if you're not making them laugh, then you're not doing your job. So you have to just let that go.
Erin Harkes is a comedian and singer-songwriter based in New York's Capital Region. Her new comedy special and record is titled Uncle Ernie. You can watch it on her YouTube channel or tune in on most streaming platforms. Her website is erinharkes.com, and you can find her podcast, Mistress of None, on both Apple and Spotify. Erin, thanks for coming on.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks to you for listening to 51%. 51% is a national production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio in Albany, New York. It's produced and hosted by me, Jesse King. Our associate producer is Jody Cowan, and our theme is Lolita by the Albany-based artist Girl Blue. Just a reminder that you can listen to 51% anytime at WAMCpodcast.org or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can stay in the loop on all of WAMC's shows by signing up for our weekly newsletter Airwaves at WAMC.org. We hope you'll join us next week. Until then, I'm Jesse King, 51%.
I was every single girl, I was nobody else, I was so sure of myself. I was 15 and a half, he was a hollow laugh. And I lost my cool somewhere along